than 20 years experience in management, operations, financial analysis, and planning, and business development. Corey has also been active in strategy implementation in startup, emerging, commercial, and residential businesses. He's previously served in executive positions at Frontier, Kodak, Venga, and General Electric Capital. Dr. Laszlo Mechler is a professor of neurology and oncology at the State University of New York at Buffalo and medical director of the Dent Neurologic Institute. Dr. Mechler has conducted some of the first major retrospective research trials on medical marijuana in headaches and other neurologic disorders. He is United Council for Neurologic Subspecialties certified in neuroimaging, neuro-oncology, headache medicine, and medical cannabis. Dr. Michael Mendoza is Commissioner of Public Health for Monroe County and Associate Professor at the University of Rochester in the Departments of Family Medicine, Public Health Sciences, and Nursing. Dr. Mendoza bridges his experience leading clinical practice transformation with his passion for systems change to improve population health and approaches his role as Commissioner with the goal of strengthening the connections between clinical medicine and public health in our community. He's board certified in family medicine. In addition to his responsibilities as Commissioner, Dr. Mendoza is an active clinician and educator, practicing both ambulatory and inpatient family medicine. Harold C. Smith, PhD. He's a cell and molecular biologist and full professor at the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. He is a member of the Center for AIDS Research and RNA Biology Center. In 2016, Dr. Smith founded CannaMetrics for the development of methods to enhance cannabis testing with cell-based testing standards that better inform patients and physicians of potency and dose. So we're going to jump right in and start really with some explanations for some of the terms that many people have been using. And we'll start with what is the endocannabinoid system? If somebody wants to take that first.
Do I get that? I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak today, and I really appreciated Miss or Mrs. Dawson's comments on our guest doctor in this case on the cannabinoids. If you've ever gone to a concert, rock concert or music concert, you see that person halfway through the crowd with a massive box with all sorts of switches on it. And they're controlling the music coming off the stage and controlling the sound that comes to you, to your ears. That's what the endocannabinoid system is in our bodies. We've had that ever since we've been primates, ever since human beings have lived on this planet, and all mammals have it. It's a system of responding to our environment and also kind of modulating what we do every day, our immune system, our metabolism, so we're all tuned to our environment. Interestingly, if someone wanted to make cannabis illegal, they have to make the human body illegal because we make cannabinoids every single day. And it's that system that makes cannabinoids and responds to it that the plant materials are interacting with. So that plant material modulates us up and down and controls what we do. And so the endocannabinoid system literally is every cell is bristling with the ability to sense what's out there and then respond appropriately to control the whole body. Your organs are communicating, your nervous system is communicating. That's the elegant and beautiful system known as the endocannabinoid system in our body. And plant materials interact with that and cause the effect that many have responded to in this audience probably. But it's also known as the entourage effect from full spectrum products, and we'll talk about that, or specifically the THC and CBD.
Let me take it to a clinical perspective. There are a lot of neurological diseases where there's deficiency syndrome. Example, Parkinson's disease, a lack of dopamine. Depression, a lack of norepinephrine or serotonin. Alzheimer's disease, a lack of acetylcholine. These are deficiency syndromes, and we treat those diseases by adding either dopamine, acetylcholine, etc. There's something called endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. Ethan Russo published about this about 10, 15 years ago, and it hasn't been totally embraced by our medical community. Just remember, only 9% of the curriculum in medical schools is related medical students are not taught about this whole issue. And there are deficiency syndromes out there that I see every day, including migraines, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, where potentially the endocannabinoid system that was very well described by Dr. Smith is deficient. And by adding something external, you may regulate that system. And that's why this plant is not the panacea for everything, but it improves the quality of life of our patients because of its effect on the endocannabinoid system.
So I'm going to throw something in, and I don't mean to sound antagonistic, but there is another system called the opioid system, and it's a naturally occurring system. I certainly am not going to advocate for the, making that legal. It's not. It's a very valuable, medicine in medicine. We also know that we took it a little bit too far with opioid medications, and one of our roles as physicians is to evaluate the evidence and to understand where we might be going. And I'm not yet going to weigh in pro or con on this, simply just to say that we have to be thoughtful about how we move forward, because where we are in the opioid crisis is a result of not being thoughtful.
If I could just say that, 2017 there was 47,600 deaths related to opiate overdose. And from the Columbia Care perspective, we're looking at the research of that, and we're doing studies. And we actually recently announced 100 million ways to break the opiate crisis. And we're working with Montefiore Medical Center and Albert Einstein College in Brooklyn to try to find ways to help this problem too.
So continue with some of the basic questions too. If you could explain to everyone, what are the key chemical compounds in cannabis and hemp?
Well, the cannabinoid, they go by strains, sativa, ruderalis, or indica, has over 1,000 chemicals in it. We usually group them in 3 groups: the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and the flavonoids. We know that flavonoids and terpenes in themselves have excellent medical effects, poorly researched, but we know that they're efficacious for various disorders. We focus in on the cannabinoids, and we really focus in on 2 most common, which is obviously THC and CBD. But we all know there's a long list of other cannabinoids where some companies are trying to isolate and specifically saturate for the treatment of diseases. So we're somewhat minimalistic, so we talk about 2 cannabinoids and its ratios and its dosages. And they are the compounds, but the reality is the future, the science, is going to develop in a different direction. And so the question right now is it going to be by pharmaceutical companies, which it already started, as you all know, with the approval of Epidiolex of GW Pharmaceuticals, which is now a Schedule 5 drug, or is it going to go into a different form, the entourage effect, with multiple different forms of the cannabinoids, and including terpenes and flavonoids. So that's where we are today, and just a little background so you understand. Presently, I have 8,000 patients on medical marijuana, which is the largest in the country. I see 8% of all patients in New York State. There's 2,300 providers, 100,000 patients. We have 8,000. We're not seeing patients to bill them. We actually don't bill. We don't request any cash from these individuals. I refuse to accept any dollars from my patients. So we actually see the patients. I put them in studies. Just last week in Philadelphia, we presented 6 of our research studies. 1 was pulled out of 4,000 to be given to the media. So there's a lot of media press on one of my studies. So we're very much focused at my institute, as the director of the Cannabis Economy, looking at research and answering the questions. And the question that has to be asked: does cannabinoids decrease the use of opioids? And my studies have shown that, and those studies are actually now published, and you can look those up.
Dr. Smith, you mentioned the entourage effect. Can you explain what that is?
Well, so to play off on the number of chemistries that are inside this plant, it's a very complicated plant. Pharmacologically, it's very complicated. There are approximately 110 cannabinoids in a plant, and different strains vary in those cannabinoids. Now, THC may be a very potent psychotropic effect on the human body, but some cannabinoids can actually mitigate that. And so these cannabinoids are interacting sometimes on the same molecules on cells and sometimes on unique molecules on cells. And if you can imagine, if everyone in this room started having a conversation, that is what it would be like when 110 cannabinoids come in and trigger a cell to respond in various ways. It's a din of communication. And that din, that loud noise of all those cannabinoids telling the cell to go in various directions and various concentrations is what you experience, what the human experiences and psychologically interprets as the entourage effect. Anyone who has taken cannabis for any reason knows that there's a difference in how you feel from strain to strain. It's not just about how high you get with THC, but some highs are different in terms of how active you are intellectually, how uptunded you are, how quiet you are, how hungry you get, how soon you get hungry, how athletic you feel. And in terms of metabolism, that is all changed as well. Some affect diabetes, some affect fat burning. So this combination of 110 different cannabinoids with the terpenoids and all the other things coming at your body at the same time create an averaging effect all together, all of us talking, and that is what your body experiences as an entourage effect. Single cannabinoid like a THC put in low, medium, and high into a beverage or into a gummy bear will have a particular effect, and you'll experience that effect in a certain way. But that same amount of THC coming from a plant-sourced material, which is called full spectrum, which means the whole extract and everything in it coming at you, well, that might have the same THC. It'll be moderated by all the other cannabinoids, and you'll have a muscle effect, a body effect, an intellectual effect, and that cannot be recapitulated by a single cannabinoid. That is the entourage effect. That means everything together.
So I know the list is long, but Mr. Ewer, maybe you could start.
Sure.
Cannabis right now currently being used to treat what in New York State? Maybe the top ones, and then perhaps something surprising that people don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of take a story here. Early on in the program, 2016, there wasn't a lot of patients in New York State. There was about 14,000 registered patients, and the primary qualifying conditions were cancer, HIV, MS, ALS. And over time, as we got into the program, right, Columbia Care, we hired people out of RIT, University of Buffalo, U of R, Coastal University, tomato farmers, and we wanted to figure out how to do this, right? Because to the credit of the Department of Health, it is highly regulated. So you cannot run out of product after 1 year's use. You have to make sure that you're constantly supplying product that's tested. Every lot that you make is just like pharmaceutical products. They have to go through a process. So when we started early on, we built the foundation. We built sublingual tinctures and we built vapes. And we had to figure out how to get the potency and the consistency of the quality of the product so that every time you got spot on. And as the as the conditions opened up over time, the state became more comfortable. They came up with chronic pain, which is if you have a debilitating disease over 90 days and it can't be rehabbed, you're qualifying. And that opened up the market tremendously. A little bit later on, PTSD came into play, and then opiate recovery as of last year, whether you're recovering from a mental health state or if you're just in pure recovery in general and you qualify. So as we looked at that, and the market went from 14,000 to 85,000 in the fourth quarter of 2018, and probably this week, as of May 14th, it was 99,729 registered patients. So think about what I said. You have to have compliance, you have to have safety, you have to make sure that you never stock out of your product. So we built it so that we never would do that, and we never have. And I'm proud to say today, as an example with our hard-pressed tablets, we've generated over 2.2 million tablets or capsules that have gone into patients' bodies that have been consumed, and everything has been tested, everything's come out safe, and that's what we continue to do as we look to the future of the conditions. We're hoping for podiatrists, we're hoping for oral surgeons. Imagine the day when you can go to your pre-op and you can go ahead and get certified instead of an opiate and having medicinal marijuana or medicinal cannabis, and to be able to have that, it's home delivered to you 2 days before your procedure. So that's how we look to the qualifying conditions of the future, as well as opening it up to practitioners.
Does anybody else want to answer that question in terms of what it's being used for, or maybe what would be surprising to people that may not know about what it's being used for?
I'll take this opportunity to chime in on the evidence for which medicinal marijuana may be used to treat opioid use disorder. There are early studies that suggest that, and there are early studies that suggest otherwise. I think that evidence needs to be stronger. There certainly hasn't, to my knowledge, been a high-level meta-analysis to RCT that looks at that comparison. And until there is, from a medical standpoint, that is our level of evidence that we rely on to know that something works. That's not to say that we don't use early evidence to guide practice, because we do all the time. But I think, from our standpoint, from medical society standpoint, we think that the jury is still out on that one. And so before you all go home saying, let's use medical marijuana to treat opioid use disorder, I think we need to have some pause.
I've had the opportunity to lecture all over the world on this subject, and every meeting I have somebody from academia. I'm a professor of neurology and oncology, past president of 2 medical societies. I've been consultant for about 5 countries, including Mexico, England, Switzerland, and Hungary, on this subject. And what Dr. Mendoza is doing is completely correct. As a physician, as a leader in the medical community, the problem has been that physicians have been bypassed in this whole subject. We went from patients and patient advocates, bypassed physicians, and went to politicians and advocates. And then it was legalized. The physician societies are sitting and saying, wait a minute, we don't have enough proper science to approve the use of cannabis, even though it's been used for 12,000 years, testimonials, we got all that. But physicians cannot live in that world. They need science, they need actual proof that they can give a drug that's A, safe, even though we have clinical experience, but also are efficacious in specific diseases. Even though the New York State has approved 13 indications, of which most of them, by the way, are neurological, it's still, the proof is not there. The problem is, our hands are tied as physicians. Since 1970s, it was scheduled by Nixon as a Schedule I drug, despite what the committee stated. 94% of all studies on cannabis has been looking for the negativity and not the positivity. So we don't have large randomized studies looking at the use of different forms of cannabis. That is a problem in the medical community. Now we have the business community. Most of you are here. And the business guy, I shuddered when I heard that comment in the personal crowd. Physicians are going to be making money. That's not what we're about. Physicians make enough money. They don't need to get into cannabis to make money. They need to protect our patients. And what's missing here is our patient-oriented care. Because my patients, if you want to look at numbers, and I appreciate, I think, Corey is Columbia Cares, one of the better groups of registry ROs in the state. The problem is 35% of my patients cannot even go to the dispensary to get it because of costs. Another 35%, now we're up to about 70%, go and then take 1/3 of the dose so they can survive. I'll end it with this example. I told my patient, I'll promise I'll tell it to you. Yesterday, she was on 5 drugs, including Oxycontin, for about 8 years. Destroyed her life. I got her off 5 drugs with medical marijuana. $700 a day, a month, $700 a month. And she is in no way a woman with the means to stop paying $700. So whatever we do here as a business, we have to take focus on the patient first. And don't lose sight of that. Because you may make money on this. I promise you our patients are not. So that's the emphasis I want to have here. And this may be not appropriate for the speaker.
Are patients being priced out?
So, we are a not-for-profit company. We are not a not-for-profit company, right? We're investing hundreds of millions of dollars into our infrastructure on a daily basis. I just mentioned that the consistency, the quality of the products that we're giving to our patients, we don't want to serve them garbage, right? We want the same Coca-Cola recipe every day for that patient to be able to have the quality of life that they need. I see firsthand patients that are on numerous amounts of opiates and benzos, fentanyl patches, and we're getting them off. And the sum of the whole of the parts at times, maybe they are saving more money even though they have to spend for medical marijuana. I agree, prices are high, but we're also in an investment phase. What we need some help with the local insurances to be able to get and give back, right? Even if we cut prices, in my opinion, patients will never be satisfied until you have a $10 copay.
Let's talk a little bit about the research in terms of the the excitement in this room, as Mr. Glazer was saying earlier, the hype that's going around the business, and yet there is some concern about how safe cannabis is, or that there are health concerns still around it. Could you speak to those health concerns and maybe putting the cart before the horse a little bit, some instances?
So I'll start. So first, as the Commissioner of Public Health in Monroe County, my job is to do everything I can to keep this county healthy and safe. I think we can all agree that health and safety are paramount. As a primary care doctor, I have patients who struggle through a whole host of medical illnesses. My job is to do the right thing by them. As I reflect on the date up until now, I think we can all agree that education is important. I think we can all agree that the social justice component needs to be given a lot more attention. I think we want to prevent any kind of problem down the road. I think we can all agree on that. And I have to say that I've learned a lot from being here, and I think most doctors don't know what perspective is being represented in this room. And so thank you, I've learned a lot from this conversation. At the same time, I think it's important for you all to hear the doctor's perspective. And the doctor's perspective is one of caution and concern. We are not the people you go to for innovation and fun. I hear a lot, read a lot. One thing I've never read is for a good time, call the health commission.
Would you like to change that?
No. My job is to present where the questions are. We have ample evidence that suggests that marijuana is highly addictive. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that we have a major addiction problem right now, manifesting in an overdose crisis and a whole larger crisis beneath that has led to a 3-year consecutive decline in life expectancy in this country. Not since World War I have we seen that degree of decline in health status in this country. And we would be remiss if we didn't raise that as a possible concern related to the legalization of marijuana. That being said, we want to learn. The American Medical Association, the Medical Society of the State of New York State Association of Health Officials have all come out in opposition to the legalization of adult use of recreational marijuana. And that's not to say that we're not open to learning, because we all want to learn. We are here, though, to present the possibility of risks to addiction, to youth, to traffic safety, cardiovascular and respiratory effects. These are all questions that have not been answered. And I think if we head blindly into this situation, we are going to repeat history. And some of that history is not good.
So let me just clarify my perspective. What Dr. Mendoza is talking about is recreational marijuana. I'm talking about medical marijuana. Now, at one point, I'm not here to promote recreational marijuana. In fact, if I could, I'm an oncologist. I'm against smoking for the last 35 years of practice as the chief at the cancer hospital at Roswell Park. I'm not for recreational. That's a personal opinion. Do I think recreational marijuana is far more dangerous than alcohol or smoking? The answer is no. But I'm not here to defend that subject. I'm here to talk about medical marijuana. So I was a skeptic when I started with this program. I've been a researcher in brain cancer and neurological disorders all my life. So I was a skeptic. I had no experience, no knowledge. And it took about 8,000 patients later to see the difference. Do I think medical marijuana is a highly addictive drug like nicotine is, which is by far the most addictive, killing 500,000 people in this country per year, or alcohol, which is killing about 85,000 people a year? No, I don't think so. But there are groups of individuals that would not give even medical marijuana to unless it's strongly indicated, meaning juvenile adolescents, pregnancy, and lactation. Women are lactating. There are groups. So in my experience, now this is a misunderstanding. I went to Colorado, Wild West, California, Wild West. I've been to dispensaries, and everyone's fixated on the fact that people who want marijuana want to get high. Not true. People who want marijuana in my community want to get feeling better, want their pain relief, want their sleeping patterns improved. They want quality of life. So I firmly believe that most people with medical marijuana, now the real question you need to ask in the audience, of the 8,000 patients that we study every day, the data comes into electronic records, what % of those patients get high? Any thoughts?
What percentage? My sister
Did I see her yesterday? I think so, yes. I can't talk about that, but thank you. No, I don't know who she is. But 2% have euphoria as a side effect of whatever I'm doing, different ratios. So most people in my program want improved quality. The 75-year-old with bad rheumatoid arthritis, with deformities of the hand, in a wheelchair, does not want to get high. So we just have to realize that we have to separate recreational. There's always going to be a drinker who wants to get drunk all the time. But many of you are responsible drinkers. And so it's the same thing with medical marijuana. Most of the people who want medical marijuana are not abusers of the system because it's cheaper on the street, by the way.
And I'll add that I would commend the system for medical marijuana. I've worked with colleagues who certify for medical marijuana, and I've seen excellent outcomes. And so I think the way that has rolled out, it can be a model for how we move forward with recreational. But I do think we have to have some caution.
And if I could comment, we do tours with people all over the world all the time. And I had some folks not too long ago from the West Coast that came in and they said, after seeing our processes, if they would have done this first in those states, it would be a whole different story today. So we're not perfect, but we're learning and taking sort of the slow roll approach to the state over the last few years, I think it was the right move, right? We worked on getting the brand, the product quality. Now every product that we have out on the streets is branded. You know what it is. If a child eats it, you can call a first event hotline and they can identify it. We've had the Rochester Police Department through our facilities. They understand what our drugs are. Doesn't have our logo on it, it's not ours, right? Educating probation officers, educating colleges and universities of what this is about. We are out trying to educate people. Until people understand what we're doing, it's going to be a continued challenge.
Dr. Smith, did you want to
That's a great segue to my comment. I want to get back to the issue of research, and what everyone's been talking about here on the panel is what's referred to in the medical industry as standard of care. A doctor is confined to what they can do and the drugs they can prescribe to you for whatever they believe your circumstance is based on standard of care. If they don't adhere to that, they are subject to malpractice. All right, so standard of care doesn't exist for cannabis right now in any form other than for rare forms of epilepsy that have been approved by the FDA. What does that mean? How does something become standard of care? And that comes from years of research which attests variables, one patient getting this, one patient getting that, under very controlled circumstances. You can imagine 110 cannabinoids. We really only know about THC and CBD. The rest of them are all interacting with one another, and we have no clue, really. And why is that? Because research was prohibited, because most of the research in the United States is done by federal dollars, and a tier 1 school like Cornell or the University of Rochester would lose almost 3/4 of its funding if we engaged in cannabis research outside of the federal allowances. So it is illegal federally, so it was illegal to get grants, and therefore your faculty position disappears. You move your family out of Rochester just because you wanted to study cannabis, so you study diabetes instead. I mean, this is a very difficult situation. So I've been hearing about education. That's important, but education comes through research knowledge. It all comes down to the fact that this country has barred an intellectual endeavor to understand what's going on in cannabis for so long that we are stupid compared to other countries. And so I advocate for research that can inform not only recreational use, if that's what people want, but medicinal use, so that doctors can understand what cannabis variety and composition, a blend of cannabinoids, is appropriate for what treatment. We really don't know it. And that was the last point I wanted to raise, that appetite. You think, everyone gets the munchies, right, when you smoke, but that's not exclusive to THC and getting high. And my personal experience is 5 years ago, my mother was contemplating suicide, and she's 85 years old. And every phone call was about how can she possibly kill herself. I'm a scientist, I should be able to tell her how to do that. Eventually, it got to be too much, so I started doing some cannabis research, and I figured out, okay, so full spectrum hemp products might be the way for her to reestablish what she was doing. And I learned she wasn't eating. She said she had no appetite. How many times are you eating? Well, sometimes I don't eat in a day. And so, okay, that's got to stop. Because everything's going south because you're not taking care of yourself. Fast forward 5 years. This lady is making 3 meals a day. She's making her apple strudel again. She's happy. She's forward-looking. She's just moved into independent living and sold her house. This is a transformed individual. I don't have a scientific explanation for why it worked, but I do it over and over and over again, just to bring her back. So appetite for people who are in cancer therapy or people who are aging, stimulating appetite with full spectrum hemp products is absolutely, it's there. I've seen it personally.
I'd like to comment, Columbia Care in general has seen over 750,000 patients, so we have a lot of data, and we're working to do our best to understand that. We are doing observational studies with the Center for Discovery, where there are some very, very severe cases of epilepsy. You guys that are familiar with Epidiolex, which is the Schedule 5 drug, we are doing very similar types of studies with our current Clariseed small THC, the CBD hard-pressed tablets, and we're escalating up to higher formats of 1 to 50 or Clariseed Ultra tablets, right? And as we look at these studies, we're also looking at how do you take the cannabinoids and separate them, right? So CBDN makes you sleepy. Why would you give a patient who's already not very functional CBDN, right? So we are working on that to try to find ways to make the right cocktail. So someday, what form of epilepsy you have, you take this pill or whatever that form of medicine is, and you're solving the problem directly. So we are fully on board with trying to help solve those issues.
Fast forward that as the agribusiness gets into this more and more, they'll be able to cultivate varietals of cannabis, and this will be the personalized medicine. Thinking fast forward 5 to 10 years, we will understand eventually enough about those cannabinoids and their combinations, how they act on the body, that we'll understand that a certain variety of cannabis has the right combination, and that will be the drug for you, so to speak. We might even get to the point where we know enough about it that we can actually create chemical blends of those things. The difference is that a lot of people want to be green and have full plant material and full spectrum material. They're not interested in having chemistries made in a lab and dropped into raspberry juice. But there is a trend to go both ways, and so we need to really consider how the ag business develops new strains of hemp and marijuana, that form of cannabis, in order to personalize the application to individual diseases and people's needs.
Dr. Mitchell, I know you want to jump in here, but I do want to continue another question for you as well. We're talking about standard of care and having sort of that basis. What are we teaching medical students? You touched on this earlier too. So if the medical community isn't established necessarily because the research perhaps isn't there for some of this, what are medical students coming out of school doing? Are they ready to embrace this and prescribe for patients who need it? Are they concerned? Where do you think they stand?
So, part of the problem is that most physicians involved in cannabis are involved in the business of cannabis, either as medical directors of companies and so on. They're not hands-on individuals seeing patients. So we need more cannabis clinics where there's physicians who are seeing actively individuals who may be doing research. So in medical students, in fact, 4 of my medical students, one right there, have done research for me in cannabis for the last year. Paul, stand up. He is a college student who's done a year and a half of research with me, has his name on 4 publications last week in Philadelphia at an international meeting, and was just accepted to medical school. That's how we're going to change the future of cannabis research, by having individuals who actually do it and become physicians. Having said that, I think one comment about New York State, we're in a very important position. If you really want to change cannabis research and how we live with cannabis in this world, lobby Albany, and I hope we have some people from Albany, lobby Albany to allow physicians outside the FDA, outside the Schedule I licensing, outside the use of University of Mississippi cannabis, allow us to do the research by having legislation that research centers in this state, supported by legislation in Albany, will be allowed to do proper research, despite the fact it may be in the world of Schedule I. That's what we need to do. Utah tried it, but they failed in legislation. If we could do it in this state, and why couldn't we? We should be able to allow individuals, because one of the reasons you Dr. Smith mentioned is true. The only reason I got involved in medical cannabis research because I run the largest neuroscience center in the country that's private. It's a privately owned institute. I'm the chief of Roswell Park. Imagine I take my brain cancer patients, ship them over to my other institute, and see them at the Den Institute. That's unheard of. I can't see these patients at Roswell because of the exact restrictions you mentioned. Because you get federal grants, NIH grants, and we're very concerned about our license, and the hospital's very concerned about the pharmacy, and everyone's concerned about research money. So I take it to a private institute. Let New York State work with us and give us legislation to do research, and we'll change the world of cannabis.
This is an audience question. Visibility adds to legitimacy for cannabis patients. Why doesn't Columbia Care advertise to consumers to make them more aware of their products and how they can serve the Rochester community?
It's a great question. So early on in the program, New York State, again, the slow roll approach, don't boil the ocean, do a few things right, which is tuned to be successful, from my opinion, with Columbia Care. Same thing for advertising. Early on, we had to be careful on what we can disclose. We actually have hired from our company a new chief marketing officer, and some of the allowance for being able to get awareness and education has opened up. So I'll give you a couple examples. We just came out with suppositories, both vaginal and rectal, for infants and for adults. These are being applied into irritable bowel syndrome, and we're getting great results. We've come out with topical lotions, same thing. We have to get the word out as to how this is happening and being able to do it in a professional manner, right? So we are in ways right now of putting a campaign together to talk about the efficacies, the consistencies, the dosing consistencies. So when you buy a vape, it's metered, right? So it comes out for 5 seconds and you get an approximate amount of medicine. So if you're a cancer patient with lung cancer and you can't inhale, and you take a 400-pound patient who's got very large lung capacity, if they drink out of a straw, they're going to take different amounts of medicine. So we're trying to get as precise as we can. Route administration with tablets 2 every 4 hours. And that's where these guys come in and they work with our PharmD pharmacists. So there will be more education coming out, and we will be working with the state. We just have to make sure that what we're releasing are not our valid claims, but that's to get education of the products and what they're doing for people.
When those come out, let's say this becomes pretty standard fare, the kind of pharmaceutical commercials we see today, from the medical professionals here on the panel, what are the concerns about that? People coming forward and thinking this may be for them, for every patient. You're seeing this with other drugs now.
I think direct-to-consumer marketing, it has to be looked at with a bit of caution as well. There are a lot of medications that were advertised prematurely and have led to adverse effects, and that's why you see lawsuits and so forth going on across the country, because things happened and we jumped the gun as an industry, as a medical profession. So, I think coming back to the need for research, we need to have research that guides this, and we need to have good education. When a patient comes to see me and says, I saw something on the internet or Dr. Google or whatever, I welcome that, because that's information that I can start with and engage in a conversation around education. But it's all about education. If we've got marketing that is deceiving, if we've got marketing targeting youth, those are things that we've got to be very careful about, because we know that the risks are great if we do this inappropriately.
And we've seen it in New York, right? Early on in the program, people would come in, I want sativa, I want indica, I want this type of strain. I can tell you over time, we've educated the community that, hey, I have cancer, I have nausea, how do I get immediate relief, right? I have epilepsy, how do I take care of this? And through educating them through the product that you're selling and the brand that you're selling, but Therapy, which is a high THC, will solve this condition, people have now become to recognize and see that this is actual medicine, and it's a way of life now.
So we are running out of time, and I want to give everyone one last opportunity to say something. If you could, what do you hope would be your biggest message and takeaway for the audience here today?
So for me personally, I think education. Not enough people know what we do from the medicinal side, of how we're making our products, how we're getting it out, what the quality and the consistency, that's one thing. Opening up the qualifying conditions and allowing more access through the right channels for patients to come in and be able to learn with the doctors would be be the second thing, and then also, you know, banking and getting some sort of insurance in place is also absolutely critical for us to continue to grow.
Dr. Mendoza?
So I think we need to continue the conversation. It's great that we've had this event today. This is an ongoing conversation for many. For those of us in medicine, a lot of my colleagues are very new to this conversation. I think we need to continue this conversation. And I will throw out, potentially as the only primary care doctor in the room, to talk to your primary care doctor about this, because there are questions, and you know, one size does not fit all. And I think your primary care physician will know your health care and your health status the best. And you know, it's all about education and have some caution about what you see, because we don't want to rush into something that will lead to negative consequences.
I think the medical community has been bypassed for the reasons I stated. I think you need to bring them back in, allow the medical community to be comfortable, knowledgeable, educate our young physicians who will become our treating physicians, and at the same time, allow our government to stake up to give us the opportunity. If I have 8,000 patients on data who are regularly being seen every 2 months, that's a form of information that we can tap into. I have the studies already written, prospective, randomized studies. I'm not allowed to give them because I don't have a Schedule I license. Yes, I'm working with Roswell to work together at the University of Buffalo. It is a difficult situation I've been put in. Allow us to do the research, get the government to support this. It's not going to come from Washington, we know that for now. And that's not going to change. So if we're going to change the attitude of physicians and our medical community and our societies who have blanket statements on their website that, yeah, we don't think it should be Schedule I, but the physician should not be using it. That's what they state, American Academy of Neurology. We need to change that. We need to lobby in Washington, and we need to politicians and the lawyers to help us physicians do what we need to do best, which is get the information out there to our colleagues.
And I would only add to the need for research and education, the understanding in the community of dosing. So many products are sold which has 5 milligrams CBD per gummy bear versus 500 or 50. What does that really mean? It means nothing, essentially. We don't understand the dosing. And on an individual basis, as you experiment with things in the spirit of don't throw out the good, just looking for the perfect, I think everyone who decides to try medicinal hemp or medicinal marijuana should ask themselves, why are they doing that? Set up a list, write down the list of things you think in your life you think need to be changed in your health care, and then consult a physician, consult other people who are involved in this Columbia Care, and get accurate information. On the box that it says 500 milligrams of CBD or 500 milligrams of cannabinoid is not telling you anything. There's no product insert in these boxes like any other drug has that describes testing, safety, and all that. It's because it doesn't exist. And so we need to start getting better in testing and informing people. We can't tell you which cannabinoid works for which disease because we're not really sure yet completely on that, or what combination. That's why I think having a cannabis institute where education is taking place, where we train people not only in the cultivation of the plant, but also in the basic science, what is going on, and how does each cannabinoid work alone in combination. The community needs to actually support science on this one, because in that way you'll get the products that you need that are accurately delivered for the drugs, for the diseases that you may be taking it for, and the conditions. So I advocate